So you know what we're talking about, the decision making of when do you move kids and how do you read them in terms of their growth stage, their developmental stage. So Kerry, you can talk about that. And I don't know on the female side, watching players grow up, this is one of the first young players I've seen. And Tom, you've got U13s, and obviously you're thinking, gee, who's going to be a national prospect? Because those kids appear, they'll appear, they'll start to stand out so much. They catch your eye that you're going, oh my God. But Kerry, can you talk about that?
Well, I think over the years, one of the most difficult thing is that all athletes and all kids grow and get physically strength at different times, and there's a certain individual that'll be strong all the way through, and there's ones that need to be let grow. And I think my experience is that taking the kids that are the best that year, that time, and ready to play. I mean, obviously there's numerous stories I can go over, but probably the one that is dear to my heart is the Jay Beagle story. Jay Beagle was a 5'9" kid when he came to midget AAA and to try out as a 16-year-old, and he could have made our team, as a fourth liner, Tim, quite easily, but he needed to experience playing the game in the offensive part of it. I mean, he was always a great foot soldier, hardest working, best listener. So I talked to him and his dad, and I just said, I think you need to feel the confidence of being a scorer, being a top 10 player, and to play midget AA to gain that experience. And I'd bring him up. Well, interesting enough, I mean, he was only 5'9" at that time. So he grows 2 inches to become 5'11" at 17, but at 19, he grew to be 6'1". And then at 21, he grew to be 6'4". Although that's quite a difference in growth spurts, Tim, at very unusual times. And so as it goes, we win the national championship, and he's our number one center. And as a 17-year-old, as an 18-year-old, he gets cut from the Hitmen. In lieu of 16-year-old, and this is one of the challenges our system's facing today, is that, looking forward to try and perceive where kids are going to end up. Some teams do it very, very well, and other teams don't. And so he got cut as an 18-year-old, and he hadn't even reached his full potential at 18, but he got cut. Goes and plays junior A. Plays there for 2 years, gets some girth and continues his work ethic and his perseverance, and then goes to Anchorage for 2 years, continues to grow, but decides he doesn't like the college. His schooling isn't quite what he wants, so he gets his dad, and they do a walk-on at Idaho, the Idaho Steelhawks. So at 22, and he's still not really fundamentally physically ready to play, at the level where he attained. But he goes there and they win the Kelly Cup. Gets noticed by Hershey. The next 2 years he plays on the Calder Cup team and becomes, that's where he really became his true self, I guess. And then the Washington Capitals. So he won an Air Canada Cup, a Kelly Cup, and then 2 Calder Cups and a Stanley Cup. And I guess the question you got to ask is that, the road, because his Pee Wee team he played on, Tim, had Mike Green on it. And he played behind a lot of these star sort of players in his own community, Ryan Stone and some unbelievable players. And so he was like a fifth or sixth wheel. And, it was a pleasure to coach him because he was such a hardworking kid and he persevered. But what I've noticed overall, and that's just one of the good stories, and those things don't happen all the time, but I continually see young skill getting pushed ahead of maturity and compete and character. And sometimes that young skill needs to gain the compete, the character, and the skill. And there, It's a big problem in hockey today, is moving kids up before they're actually ready to compete at a level where they can gain confidence. You know, and there's hundreds of different stories about it, but you know, I just watch how we're treating our young athletes. It's almost, it's not fair to a lot of them. A lot of late bloomers, they're quitting. They're just getting out of it because we don't allow them to participate, because the younger, more skilled person is coming in and taking their spot. So from a development standpoint, you got to develop all the kids. Just where's best to develop them? We should almost go to individual age brackets all the way through.
Carrie, I want to talk about the female side because I believe that we've got it right on the female side now.
You're echoing, Wally.
Yeah, I wish I knew why. Are we okay?
Yeah.
Okay. We've gone through the idea of, do we bring kids up? And no, we keep them in under 18. We've had some kids that when we evaluate traits, they had trait scores higher in some of the traits than the national senior average. And they could have played on the team, but they couldn't develop. So right now on the female side, and Kim talking about Jordan's player playing AA, not playing AAA yet, she's a smallish type D and that good, and he feels it's perfect for her development. And time will tell, of course, because it's her development that matters. But I think patience with young players on the male side. I mean, I saw players last night. One of them, Carrie and I were watching, a player named Ives from the Flames, who's the smallest player, who's the only player that I thought had hockey IQ and could skate well enough. But of course, he's small and he hasn't even been drafted by anybody yet, let alone he's not on radar. He's just too small. And that's sort of the stereotypical thing on the male side, not so much on the female side. But I don't know that acceleration of players is a problem, Sammy, on the female side. I don't think it is. Maybe it is. You're nodding yes. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, it certainly is in Ontario, where the be all end all is to play in that what used to be called the PWHL, but now it's the U18 Elite League in Ontario. So it's above midget, right? So players here, if you play on U18 AA, is not revered as much as playing in the junior league. We'll call it the junior league. And so parents will take their kids all around the province to play to be able to get a spot on that team at 15, 16, when really they should be playing midget. So I think to Carrie's point, what I was hearing from his conversation is not so much that we're not developing kids, it's that we're not, that there's so much reverence put on the top level that if you're not playing the top level, well, you're never going to make it. And so a AA or a single A kid is seen to not be developing or progressing by the rest of society. And I feel like, Carrie, your point that you made, it could have been sometime last year, but I say this to the parents on my little U9 team all the time, and within the league even, is that, you know, we don't tier kids in the classroom. And I don't know if that was you that said it, but I'm equating it with you because I think it is such a marvelous concept that, yeah, it shouldn't be about where they are in the system. It should be where they are developmentally and what coach can work with them at that point, right? It shouldn't be, oh, they're on the AAA team, so they're bound to be moving forward. Yeah, you know, AA should be just as amazing. They have a coach like Jordan, for instance, who coaches AA. That's awesome. Like even single A, these kids should not be just kind of left by the wayside because they're playing there. So within women's hockey, I feel like this is just really the last 5 years that we're really seeing that, oh, my kid has to play rep hockey. And we ran into that this year with our team in Oakville. that we had gone for 2 months of playing. We're house league. There's 4 house league teams, so we had to like pick the house league so they're equal. And then Billy and I are the coaches. So my husband in a sled and me as a woman, the only woman in the organization in a women's hockey team, which is crazy to me. But 2 months after the season started, they decided they're going to have another rep team because parents were not happy that there was only one rep team. There's only one AA team in Oakville. They wanted a single A team. So 2 months after the season started, they started plucking kids off of all of our teams, and then they reorganized the teams. And Billy and I said, like, we've been together 2 months. That's the whole point of it, is that we get to know the kids and we're coaching them. And now you're taking them off of a team with somebody who is a sledge hockey player. They're never going to have this experience again, with a woman who has played at the Olympics, let alone has her own hockey school and stuff. Like, and now you're moving them on to some dad's team who just started coaching. Like, that just, I don't know. We were just horrified by that system, that is still in existence. And it's all because parents wanted their kids to be playing rep hockey. And didn't matter that they're 7. Like, they're 7 years old and they're girls. Like, it doesn't matter. But anyways, I digress. And I just wish that more people had this mentality. But yes, we're seeing it already in the women's game. I think it just permeates, Wally, now that there's money on the line, there's scholarships on the line, and parents get just as crazy.
I just want to reiterate one other little thing that I watched over time, because I really believe that the fun factor of hockey is at jeopardy today with this acceleration, and kids tend to, when they gain confidence and when they play and they enjoy the experience, is when it's gonna be the best for the development process. And we're taking that fun factor away. Dominating and gaining more confidence is something that doesn't get talked about a lot, and I think that it needs to be talked about, because there's no use being a 4th line kid struggling at a AAA level when you could play at your own age bracket and possibly dominate. And so I use a criteria. You shouldn't leave a level until you've gained the confidence and played to the top of your potential. And what's happening is we're taking 15-year-old kids and we're putting them into a AAA environment, and they digress in so they start in Bantam at 3 points a game. They finish off their Bantam AAA level, with 3 points a game. Then at 15, they play AAA and they drop to 0.5 points a game. And then at 16, they move up and play Junior A and they drop to 0.2 points a game. And then, the experience I'm telling you right now is about Danny Bertram.
Yeah.
Tim, I think Jim. I watched Danny Bertram, one of the most gifted assets in Western Canada, go from being a confident point getter to an energy player on a 4th line on a world junior team for 2 straight years.
And
you think he enjoyed it? What's that?
And he became a fighter in the Eastern League. He's not very much bigger than I am.
Oh, I tried to talk to Jim about it, Tim, as he was going through it, because as a 15-year-old, and all he had to do, in my opinion, was, as a 16-year-old, just stay and play midget and become that 3-point-a-game guy like you were in Bantam. But he went to Camrose, but that's just one of the ones I didn't like watching. But tell you another just quick interesting thing. The national championship team that I coached in 1990-91, there was 5 16-year-old kids that were really good players, and I chose to take some 17-year-olds ahead of them. Well, we won the national championship, and I took a lot of flack because I didn't take these 5 16-year-old kids. Well, these 5 16-year-old kids had one thing in common, is they went down and they developed. 4 years later, they were on the national championship Centennial Cup team. Okay, they developed. They didn't struggle at any point in their existence. And I tell that story because struggling is not fun. Losing confidence isn't fun, and that's one of the challenges our development system is happening on the boys' side. We're pushing kids into not having fun by not developing.
Sammy, he said on the boys' side, the word confidence on the female side. You're working with a senior women's pro team. You've been with the national team. And that word, how important is it?
Oh, I mean, I think everybody on this call knows that it's everything. If you're not having fun, it doesn't matter, right? Now that the salaries in our league next year, some girls will be making $200,000 for 5 months of hockey. Like, it's crazy, right? The amount of change in the money in women's hockey has changed dramatically. And we have a free agency every summer. So you can sign 2-year contracts, but you can still renegotiate your contract. So yeah, they don't belong to us, which is also, I mean, it's a ton, right? So just a ton of pressure on the athletes. And, we see it when it comes down to points and assists and goals and, making sure that people are getting ice time. We're getting now called by agents whose players are not getting enough ice time. All these things we've never really had to deal with in women's hockey before. And at the end of the day, it comes down to the confidence of the player and how much fun they're having. Really, it's ensuring that the whole team feels valued too. Like, I think that it's hard to find a role as a president versus a GM within the hockey side, because I take care of most of the other side. But I've really tried to make my role simply about listening and hearing the player and having those check-ins with the players about everything else in their life that's going on, because trying to make them feel valued within a team and having them be okay with being on a third or a fourth line or not a power play, and not thinking about next year's contract and now maybe this is something that Tim can give some insight to, because now it's the pro mentality. This is very different than what I played. And yes, we played pro hockey in that it was the top level, but it was never the season by season. Like, it was just kind of your career and you just kind of finished when you could. I feel like the players always feel this like angst all the time that they need to perform right now or they're not gonna keep getting that contract. So it must be a really, really hard, it must be so difficult for the player. And Tim, you lived it. It's I'd be curious to get some insight on what that feels like all the time, because I certainly hear about it and it is hard on the players.
Yeah, it is definitely, it's one of those things that is ever present, but partly because it's ever present, you eventually sort of mainly put it in the back of your mind. It's just kind of life in the pro sports world, it's just the way it is. Like
maybe because we've never had it before, like maybe because it just started. Whereas you probably started that when you're like 15 years of age playing junior, right? Like,
well, yeah, there's always that, and there's a degree of it certainly at the national team level, but there's always that feeling like somebody can replace you literally tomorrow. If you get into an extended stretch of poor play, you never know what can happen, and that's just life at that level. But you just learn to deal with it. And again, Wally used the word, we started this talking about confidence, and that's what it comes down to. You have to be confident in what it is you bring to a team, and be confident that it's valuable and that you can bring it on a regular basis, and that then you have to have the confidence that when you go through those low periods, you can say to yourself, hey, I can play in this league, I belong in this league, and work with your coaches, maybe simplify some things, whatever it is, but you have to have that inner confidence that you can do it. And that's why, like we say, transmitting belief is one of the number one jobs of every coach, is to help, by transmitting belief from the coaches to the players, it helps the players develop that inner confidence that, like you said, that they're valued by their team, that they provide something to their team, and that they can grow that confidence themselves. Because nobody can give you the confidence, but coaches and teammates can help nurture the development of confidence, I think. But it's everything, really, everything. Mike Wally.
You just reinforced Carey's point. His ability to convince parents, because if you don't convince the parent, the player is going to go wherever the parents wants them to. Whether it's a Bertram or whether it's a Beagle. And so the coach's ability to withstand the pressure of the association catapulting these young, talented players ahead, and the reality of developmental stages versus projected stages before they're confident enough to grow, and they feel confident. They already got 3 points a game, but I better go out and be challenged. So it's a real fine line from the parents' point of view, and a difficult line for the parents to understand. I think the players appreciate it. So, Carey, how did you convince the Beagles?
Well, it was his physical size right at that point, like and his strength. Like he just wasn't mature. He wasn't an early mature, and so they understood it. They didn't necessarily agree with it, but I guess they trusted this mindset, and I think he was better off for it. You take. I mean, he was only 5'9", so he wasn't a big guy. You know what I mean? And so.
That's enough for midget AAA, Carey.
What's that? Yeah, it is enough for AAA, but his physical strength. Like you're talking a guy who's, his enthusiasm and his work ethic is just off the charts. But to go and do it and go and try and do that, and it was only 1 year above. It just went in the tryouts, and when I was watching him, I just felt he needed another year to get to the level that he could really dominate that. And that confidence thing was huge, but it's interesting too because the two names that were mentioned, Danny Heatley and Danny Bertram. The difference between the two is Danny Heatley played midget AAA at 16 and got 100 points. Bantam AAA, 100 points. He never left the level and he was a leading scorer at every level. So at 16, he could have probably played junior, eh, Tom?
Yeah.
But he played on a midget AAA team that had 3 first-round draft picks on it. Adrian Foster, Chris Kalanis. And they had the top 6 scorers in the Alberta Midget AAA League. But all 16-year-olds stayed and played midget versus the enticement of moving up. But a lot of that had to do, too, with the number of junior teams we had at the time. We have too many junior teams now for the amount of kids we're producing. So it's starting to allow big heads and people to move kids up when they're not quite ready. And that's go ahead, Tim.
Sorry, Brad. I think your story about Beagle, you think about, as Wally mentioned, he was probably just big enough. He could have played AAA. And like you say, he was a heart and soul, hardworking guy. Like you love to coach him. But the question becomes, can you be more than just that energy guy? And that's what you said earlier. It's like, hey, if you stay back, you maybe can develop an offensive element to your game that will make you a much better player instead of just moving up and staying in that third, fourth line role. And if you remember, Gino Cavallini told the exact same story about a smallish player who, and I forget the guy's name, who went on to, I think he's still playing right now in the NHL. I can't remember who it was, but he was a smallish, underage midget player, wanted to play for Gino's Chicago Mission, AAA team. And Gino had the same discussion with him. Hey, you know what? You could probably play on our team, but you're so small and undersized right now. Like, you might find it really difficult. You have the skill to play. Why don't you just stay back a year and, maybe you grow a bit, you get a bit stronger, but you can still dominate. You can still be a good offensive player. And reluctantly, the parents agreed to it, very reluctantly. And if I remember, I think one of the parents was okay with it and the other one was dead set against it. But they ended up letting the young guy stay back and just develop himself in his game. And it was totally for the good. He found his way scholarship-wise and got drafted, and I think is still playing right now. And again, I can't remember his name. But there's all kinds of, there's all kinds of examples like that. And it's an age-old question,
Well, Tim, one of the other advantages I had is I was that kid. My brother was the stud growing up, and I was the small little guy. And I had a harsh reality when I was 15 when a good friend of ours, Donnie Phelps, cut me from the team, and he felt it would be better for me to play a level below. And it ended up being the best year of my life for development. I went on to play junior ahead of, 16 of the kids that made the team ahead of me 2 years later. So what I learned from that was, size and strength and confidence sometimes will outweigh, moving ahead for your ego. And, so having lived and been able to watch my brother, who was, he was the guy, but he was fully formed and leading every league in scoring at whatever age he was. I wasn't that guy. I was a little guy. And so that's where I really learned from it, was that there were some proper decisions made when I grew up that they were tough to take at the time. But, I look back at it and I use those as examples for people. But today, Tim, in the boys hockey end of it, it has become more and more difficult to have kids play where they probably should develop and gain confidence. And the one thing about Beagle, when he went back and played, was the first time ever he was a top 10 scorer in the league. So we accomplished it. He accomplished what, really it was all about, is that go and gain the confidence and become a better offensive player. And he did. And I give him all the credit because, he persevered, he worked, and he was a great kid and a good hockey player. It's a guy we should be recruiting to come in and be involved with kids.
Sorry, what was that? We missed that.
I just said guys like Jay Beagle should be on the recruiting list to come and be a part of our hockey programs. Just recently retired in Calgary. He should have been earmarked to coach one of our U18 teams the minute he retires. Matt Robinson. These are guys that we need to get involved with our kids because, that's, one of the fundamental challenges we face on the boys' side today is, the leadership of those types of people could really help our programs.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, and I'll tell you this one quickly because I ran into a kid that played on the Royals in '96, the team we went to the Air Canada Cup with. His name was Greg Davis, and his nephew plays on my son's team. And this is even a greater story. He played midget 1 in his first year as a 16-year-old. 6'4", tall, gangly. And, I watched him in the tryouts and watched him, and I kept asking people, why did he play midget 1? And there was a corrupt board of directors who wanted nothing good to happen for that kid. Well, I kept him. And interesting enough, he was the only kid that ended up signing a pro contract to him off of that midget AAA team. So he went from midget 1 to AAA at 17 to Oles to down in Montreal to signing a pro contract with St. Louis. And he was the only kid that signed a pro contract off of that U18 team of the 96, 97. His name was Greg Davis. And he happened to be in the rink the other day, and we just his dad came up and he basically was so appreciative that, you know, I seen through some of the, I call the corrupt board of directors sort of stuff, and kept him. But you know, the kid did it. I mean, the kids always will show, but you know, sometimes we're losing sight of what's happening on the ice.
Carrie, your ability, Carrie, to see the talent beyond the size within the kid, the ability to select players. And Sam, when we talk about the female team and who we're inviting to camps, and what are the qualities that you see that merit this? And in my books, talent is sort of a flatline thing that's automatic. They have to have an adequate degree of talent. And he obviously did. He also has size. But I'm saying the most important trait are the intangibles. Right now, they are picking kids that are super skilled with the puck one-on-one on the guy's side. And they have no hockey sense, and they aren't building their character to be a team player. They're just developing themselves for the draft, for their own advancement, at their own expense to be a better player. So that's the critical thing that's happening is you get volunteer boards at times that change the selection process so that the kids who appear to be the most talented, and Gary, I agree, on your team, those young kids appear to be very talented, but the intangible qualities of playing the 200-foot game and doing the little things that they need to learn, they're missing out on that. So the quality of coaches to understand that, and that's where when you refer to retired former players coming back to Calgary, being involved in this process is really important. And there's a vacuum there. The tires are being just spun continually on the developmental side. And the kids are the ones that are suffering. They're really the ones that aren't having a positive hockey experience. The chemistry of the team doesn't exist because there's just a disconnect in the creation of a team and what kind of behaviors you need to have as a team player. And it's really quite amazing to watch, but it's still going on today. And that's sort of the reality. And on the female side, I'm happier working with the female side because I think there's a sense of reason here in Calgary, at least. Tom, when you coached AAA a few years ago and I got to take it over, there wasn't. It was sort of a group of people administrating the program, questioning the coaches and questioning mentors of the coaches. And with no real hockey acumen or background, and the ability to be able to share your thoughts and opinion didn't really matter. And that's sort of where it is right now. It's just spinning its tires. The game is mired. And I'm disappointed about what's happening in Toronto, but that's the reality, Sammy. Parents are still taking their kids and accelerating them and not letting them develop. And I go back to Jordan's example of that 16-year-old player is a perfect example of what appears to be the right decision for her growth and development. She's only 16. And I'm just really happy that she's going to get more opportunities because she is so confident now. And that was good to see. Anybody else? Any thoughts? We've gone all over the place. We started out with line combinations and chemistry and talking about the Calgary Flames.